So just angle that down a little. Now, if you are at all worried about balance, do make sure that you have something nearby that you can grab hold of for this one, because it isn't always the easiest one to do. What we're doing is essentially we're going to take the feet, we're going to cross them over. And so they're going to line up sort of alongside each other, but not directly alongside. They're going to be offset like that a little bit. So we're going to cross one leg over to the other, and I'm just part on the carpet and part on the floor here. So essentially just give yourself that opportunity to get your balance here. And we want to try and put both feet flat on the floor. Now, if you have restrictions at the hips, sometimes it's hard and it feels like you're resting on the outer edge of the foot. So with this, all we're going to do is very, very slowly, because we've crossed the right leg over, we're going to just go down to the left first and come back up. And so just very slowly reach down to the left and come back up.
So it's always the opposite of whatever leg you've crossed over, is that right?
You can go both ways, but it's in terms of training the brain and getting both hemispheres of the brain fired up, the brain responds better to cross patterning in the body. So opposites do work better. But occasionally I use this, if I do go the other way, it's more from a trying to balance the feet point of view. So a more physical sort of getting the grounding there. So we're going to tilt away from that side and back. So it's our right leg crossed over, so we're dropping to our left, getting that opposite connection. And just keep the movement very small, very slow. And then we're going to go the other way. And so this way tends to feel a little bit more compressed in the back. You probably don't get as much freedom of movement here as you do the other side. So you may need to make the movement just that little bit smaller. And just one more. And so we don't need to do masses of them, but we're now going to change the feet around. So we're going to take it so that the left leg crosses over. Again, we're just slightly offset. They're not directly in line with one another, but they are sort of touching each other. So from this position now, we've got the left leg crossed over, so we're going to drop down to the right and come back up. And so probably just, sort of 5 or 6 to each side is perfectly fine. Again, just when you come up nice and tall, kind of reset things, allow yourself that opportunity to become more stable, and then go to the other side. And so you'll notice the feet are constantly trying to adjust. There's a lot of moving around down below, and that's pretty normal. And a lot of us do mistake that for having poor balance. And it's not really, it's our body trying to communicate to our brain, to tell our brain to switch on the muscles that we need to keep us in a better position so that we don't fall over, because our body and our brain are always trying to protect us, whether we know it or not. Now, if we come back and we bring our feet back to side by side, generally what happens when you come back to this is that you feel a lot more grounded in your feet. You feel more stable on that connection, because now you've kind of scrambled the connection from the brain down to the feet, and it's having to sort of work really quickly to sort of reorder itself. And so the awareness comes back into your feet quite a lot here. So it's a great exercise just to create better awareness in your feet, or to use it as a stepping stone to go into something else. And so the something else that we're going to work on is if we just take the feet a little bit wider. So whenever we take a step, if I just sort of demonstrate one thing quickly, and you guys can stay with your feet wide. So when we take a step, we're sort of putting our heel down, we're going to roll through that foot. But in order for us to swing this back leg through, we actually need to shift our weight across to the front leg to make room for this to swing through. If we never leave this leg, then that changes the timing of how we move every single time we take a step. And so if you've got restrictions in the hips, that may also be contributing towards balance. So what we need to do is think about where the tummy button is, and we need to bring our tummy button over top of the arch of our foot. So if you just go to one side and bring your tummy button directly over top. If you need to look down, then do. But also what I want you to think about is, do you feel heavier in your front of your foot, in your ball of your foot, or in your heels? And if you're falling forwards or falling back too much, just adjust yourself so you feel a bit more even. And once you've got that evenness, then try to take the leg up. And then shift yourself across to the other side and do the same thing. And again, it's okay for the body to do that little bit of wavering, and it should settle reasonably quickly within a few breaths if you just relax and kind of let it happen. Because often what we do is we resist and we think, oh God, I'm going to fall over, and everything tightens, and then that kind of exacerbates the problem. So we need that really good base on the floor, which we established. We also need the hips to travel across to that side to allow us to balance. And so just continue going side to side and see if you can notice that as you do a few of them, it becomes a little bit easier. So tummy button over top of the arch of the foot. As soon as you're there, then lift the other leg. And so hopefully what you found is that that has helped, that getting yourself over top of that side is actually giving you a more chance of being stacked upright. So as I say, if we're sort of trying to lift a leg up and we haven't quite got the hips over, we can't get that off the floor because we haven't actually ever shifted our weight across to that side. And we may be doing it partially, but not enough to actually feel confident with taking this leg up off the floor. So it's all about trying to get that position. And if you're struggling to actually get that position, or you're still struggling with balance, then the bit that we need to add in is actually trying to increase the movement in those hips. And so if you just put your hands at the sides of the hips and you push towards the right, and you bring yourself back to center, and then realign your feet so they feel the same on both sides, and then push left and bring yourself back into center. Ideally, what we're looking for here is that the movement on each side is the same. Sorry, somebody's still trying to get in. I don't know who that is. So when you push to one side and you come back to center, and then push to the other side and come back to center, we're kind of looking for signals or clues that there might be something going on. So say, for example, I push into the right and I feel that I've got a lot of tightness on the outside of that hip. So if this hip is tight, then pushing across and getting into that hip is going to be really difficult. So as a fix for that, what you would do is actually just work on that side. So you bring yourself over to that side and come back to center, over to that side and back to center. And you're just gently trying to open that space. And so most people who know me know that I don't like traditional stretches. I don't think there's a lot of merit in trying to hold something for 30 seconds or longer. Our bodies have a natural stretch reflex in that it kicks in, and it will stop us from getting the stretch that we need. And it's also not really a good idea to take a muscle or a joint and stretch it open for a longer period of time. All we want to do is kind of fluctuate in and out of that position, because we're more likely to gain some ground if we're moving in and out of it, because our joints need to open and close, and our muscles just need that little bit of a reminder to open enough to create some more movement there. So if we go back, and I always start, if I've worked right, I'll always go left first, let this close down entirely, and then go back to the right and see if I've got more movement. And so you should find the side you've worked on, if you were doing right along with me, is that suddenly you've got a lot more movement when you go to that side. And so if that was the side that you were struggling to get your tummy button over top and to balance, you can then recheck it and see if it's any better. And so there's all kinds of exercises. If you Google balance work, there's all kinds of things like balance boards and things to stand on that kind of wobble you all over the place. I really think that it is better just to do it on the ground, and it's better to be stable and solid here. Some of the exercises that they show you in these videos that you can find on sort of Google and YouTube and things like that, using really expensive bits of equipment, Sometimes there's a little bit too much movement. So if you're still reduced in movement at your ankles or you're still reduced in movement at your hips, we want to try and ideally get the movement back into the body and then kind of allow it to experience what you need it to experience in this case, which is trying to build that balance and that base that you need on the floor to give you it. So the big thing, and just to recap, is that when we go forward and back in our feet, we want to feel that we can sort of find that middle ground so that we feel balanced forward and back. And we also want to feel that our feet, right or left, feel like that we are even. And so another thing that people tend to do posturally is we all have a side that we like to lean to when we're standing and talking to somebody for a long period of time, and we really push into the hip. Now, if you watch where my hands are and when I shift my weight over to that side, how much my hips actually have to move to get over there. And so over a long period of time, and we all have a side. And so if I were to go to the other side, that side actually feels so odd that I can't get over there because I know that when I do it, I tend to do this hip. So the thing is trying to sort of create a situation where it feels balanced. And so if you're always pushing into this hip, at some stage we need to go into the other side to open it up so that we stay balanced on both sides. Because if we're opening this hip, we must be closing this one. And there's always that balance and that relationship in the body. And so now you've got a closed hip. When I take a step forward, how am I ever going to open that hip enough to get my hip across when I'm walking? And so all of these things come out somewhere in our body, and it always happens as something that we just wake up with one day. It was just there. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to why we have an ache or a pain in that particular place. But the answer is almost always starting somewhere at the ground and working the way up. And so I've kind of digressed a bit, as I always do, because I'm always talking about so many other things in the body that could happen. Balance is just one of the things. So we'll stop there and just take a few questions if anybody has any. Let me just stop that.